The first thing Mara noticed was the smell of ink. It was sharp and metallic, clinging to the air of the conference room long after the lawyers had left. The glass walls reflected the city skyline, clean, polished, untouchable, just like everything else in the building that belonged to Nathaniel Crowe. Billionaire. Visionary. A man who had built his empire on contracts so airtight they were taught in business schools. Mara stood near the door, clutching a thin folder to her chest. She was the youngest person in the room, barely 22, her badge still stiff and new against her cardigan. An intern. Invisible. Or so everyone thought. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, skimming through the final agreement with quick, confident movements. His assistants hovered nearby, waiting for a nod, a signature, a dismissal. This acquisition was the biggest of the quarter. An affordable housing development on the east side of the city, a project that had won him praise in the press for giving back. Mara's stomach twisted. She had been photocopying documents earlier when she noticed it. At first, she thought it was a formatting error. A misplaced paragraph. But the more she read, the colder her hands became. They had changed the contract. Not the parts Nathaniel had approved weeks ago. Not the bold sections discussed in meetings. The change was subtle, buried deep in legal language so dense it felt intentional. A clause that allowed Crowe Holdings to dissolve the housing agreement after 18 months, replacing it with commercial redevelopment if deemed financially necessary. Which meant one thing. The families who would move in, the single mothers, the elderly tenants, the people promised stability, would be quietly displaced once the tax benefits expired. Mara swallowed hard as Nathaniel flipped the last page and reached for his pen. Her mind screamed at her to stay silent. She was an intern. Her contract ended in 3 weeks. She needed the recommendation. The job. The chance to escape the cycle of temp work and late-night studying. But she also saw her mother's face in her mind, tired eyes, calloused hands, years spent trusting promises written on paper she didn't fully understand. Nathaniel lifted his pen. Mara's voice caught, barely audible. No one noticed. The pen touched the paper. I saw they changed the contract, she whispered. The sound was small, fragile, but it cut through the room like glass shattering. Nathaniel froze. Every head turned. The silence was suffocating. What did you say? One of the senior lawyers snapped, irritation flashing across his face. Mara's cheeks burned. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to look up, not at the lawyer, but at Nathaniel. His eyes, sharp and steel gray, were fixed on her. I said. I saw they changed the contract, she repeated, louder this time. There's a clause in Section 14. Subsection C. It wasn't in the version from last month. The lawyer laughed, a short, dismissive sound. This is not appropriate. She doesn't understand. Section 14, Nathaniel said quietly. The lawyer stopped. Nathaniel set his pen down slowly. Read it. The assistant hesitated, then pulled up the document on the screen. Lines of legal text filled the wall. As the words were read aloud, the room shifted. What had sounded harmless on paper now echoed with meaning. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. This allows us to terminate the housing agreement, he said. After 18 months. The lawyer cleared his throat. It's standard risk mitigation. Market conditions change. We have to protect. Protect who? Nathaniel asked. No one answered. Mara felt her heart pounding so hard she thought it might drown out everything else. She expected anger. Reprimand. Security being called. Instead, Nathaniel stood. He walked slowly around the table, eyes never leaving the screen. When he stopped, he was standing in front of Mara. How did you find this? He asked. I was copying documents," she said softly. The language didn't match the earlier draft. "My mom taught me to compare everything. She lost her apartment once because of a clause like this." Something flickered across his face. Not anger. Something closer to shock. "This clause was added without my approval?" he asked, turning to his legal team. The lawyer's face paled. "It's common practice. Everyone does it. The board expects." Nathaniel raised a hand. "Everyone does it," he repeated. Then he looked back at Mara. "You could have said nothing." Mara shrugged, a sad, small gesture. They would have believed the promise. And then they would have blamed themselves when it was taken away. The room felt different now. Smaller. Heavier. Nathaniel turned back to the table. "Get me the original draft," he said. "Now." Within minutes, the earlier version appeared on the screen. Clean. Honest. No hidden escape routes. "This is what I approved," Nathaniel said. "This is what will be signed." The lawyer protested. "Nathaniel, this could cost millions." "Then it will cost millions," he replied coldly. "Because my name will not be attached to a lie." He took the pen again and crossed out the clause himself, the black ink bold and unmistakable. Then he signed. The assistants exchanged uneasy glances. The lawyers gathered their papers in stiff silence and filed out, the door closing softly behind them. Mara stood frozen, unsure whether to leave or apologize. Nathaniel looked at her. "What's your name?" "Mara." "How long have you been here, Mara?" 3 months. He nodded slowly. "You understand that speaking up like that, most people wouldn't." "I know," she said. "I almost didn't." He studied her for a long moment, then gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She obeyed, heart racing. "You saved me from becoming someone I never wanted to be," he said. "Do you know how rare that is?" Mara shook her head. "When you have this much power," he continued, "people stop telling you the truth. They start telling you what protects them." He leaned back. "Why did you whisper?" She smiled faintly. "I didn't think anyone would listen." He let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "I heard you." The housing project opened the following spring. Families moved in with keys in trembling hands. Rent was fair. Contracts were clear. No hidden clauses. Nathaniel attended the opening without cameras. Mara stood beside him, no longer an intern. Her temporary badge had been replaced with a permanent one, junior compliance analyst. Her job was simple, he had said, make sure the truth stayed visible. One afternoon, months later, they stood on the balcony overlooking the courtyard. Children ran across the grass, laughter echoing between the buildings. "I still think about that day," Nathaniel said. "About how close I came." Mara nodded. "Me too. What would you have done if I hadn't listened?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "I would have kept whispering. Somewhere else. To someone else." He smiled then, not the polished smile of magazine covers, but something real. "Kindness," he said, "doesn't always shout. Sometimes it risks everything just to be heard." Mara looked out at the families below, safe in homes that wouldn't disappear in fine print. And for the first time, she believed that even the smallest voice could change the shape of something very big.